Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all here. It has been a week, child. It has been a week. Every Thursday, I go to a KC 360 meeting. It's at 9 o'clock at the Magus Center at Rockhurst University here in Kansas City. And I'm usually there with 85 other people who are uh, smarter, more involved, more connected than I am, so that we can talk about homicides in our city and how to reduce them. At present, where our homicides are down 20% over last year. Generally, in the audience, there's of that 80 to 90 people or so, there's generally about a dozen police officers. And yesterday, we were having a little fun, and we took a picture of me. I'm gonna see if I can find it. We took a picture of me being handcuffed by my police officer friends. They weren't really handcuffing me, of course, um, but we were paying a nod to what had happened to Tyreek Hill in Miami-Dade County. And while I was watching, what I want to talk about is somatic empathy today, because while I was watching, I felt in my body incredible amounts of stress. Um, I was Heart was racing. I found my stomach was in knots. I was nervous. And this was especially true when his friends got out of the car, talking to the police officers. And it was doubly true when his shared player reached in his pocket to get his driver's license. I noticed that my body was in a state of distress. And I had never paid attention to these things before, mostly because I had not read My Grandmother's Hands or The Body Keeps the Score, both books that talk about like what we hold in our bodies. And I was waiting though for people to redirect the energy and then to blame Tyreek, which is exactly what happened. It did not matter that the police officers gauged his speed based on their just own visual cue. They have no idea how fast he was going, but he was speeding. When you're getting a speeding ticket, I think it would be really helpful if folks would just ask you for your driver's license and give you the ticket and move on. I don't know what the conversation is about. I wish someone could tell me about that, but I would be mad. I think about my very first car, it cost $600. Nine bought it for me. But I love that car. I would be mad if somebody walked up to my window and just started like banging on the window. This is a quarter of $1 million vehicle and you knocking your hand on the window, like just cultural sensitivity. Don't sit on my car, don't put your fingerprints on my car, don't touch my windows, and don't touch my radio, right? Like, just don't do that. And one of my friends is from high school is a police officer, and I always kind of like ask him, so what's your take, right? He happens to be white, and he was like, yeah, that escalated just way too quickly. But what we don't always recognize is that when we're trying to address bias and lack of empathy and what our experiences are like with police officers, folks always want to look at the individual situations and go, well, if this person would have X, then they wouldn't have experienced this. Instead of looking at the theme of things that occur and then saying basically thematically, what are the chances that this would just still occur in this way? And what in the world do we need to do about it? Right. And I just cannot imagine that any of my friends who are white, and I wrote about this in the paper this week, would end up in a situation where they are on the ground, handcuffed, that they get like body tackled, cursed at because they were speeding. I can't even imagine a situation in which my white friends would be asked to get out of the car. And when you if you have ever gotten a ticket, I mean, maybe some of you do not speed, you have never been stopped for speeding, you hand out your information and you roll your window back up because it's not illegal to roll your window back up. But what are we talking about? All the ways in which Tariq could have been better. All the ways in which Tariq should have, you know, complied, should have rolled the window down, shouldn't have said something about the window being tapped on. Sandra Bland did not put her cigarette out, and she ends up not only arrested, but then dies in police custody somehow. You cannot imagine a world in which these kinds of things happen to white people. And until we acknowledge this, we're going to continue to have in our bodies a different experience because our cities are like, how do police show up in the city versus how do police show up in the suburbs? In the suburbs, police are guardians. That's why we wave at them. That's why we are excited to see them because they're there to protect and serve us. In the city, it's like your body does something different even when I'm moving in and out of these spaces, because in the city, it is not a guardian point of view. It is more like an occupant's point of view. I am here to police you. And when you are being policed, that does something in your body. And when I consider um, like just the interesting things and ways that we spend things, I think is fascinating. Um, did y'all see that this Olympian was burned to death by her boyfriend? I'm trying to look up what her name was. She was from Uganda, Rebecca. Last name Cheptegei. I might be saying that wrong, but her boyfriend put gasoline on her and then burned her to death. And what was interesting was even in this situation, right? We didn't talk about how we view the system of domestic violence. I saw lots of comments about why was she with him? How did she meet him? You know, there were a few people who were saying he was jealous or whatever. It's like that I held in my body. I was like, can you imagine that you just participated in the Olympics and then you go home and your boyfriend like sets you on fire? I don't even know. But this collective thing that is happening all over the globe, whether it is citizens at the hands of police or domestic partners at the hands of their lovers, no matter what it is, this collective harm that is occurring, we hold in our bodies. And then when we don't release it out of our bodies, when we decide that we are going to not exercise, we're not going to meditate, that we're not going to engage in any kind of spiritual practice to center ourselves, that we're not going to eat real food, that we're not going to eat mostly plants, that we are not going to take breaks from social media. This stuff gets like held into our bodies and then we end up blowing it through other people. And what I think is fascinating, talking about intentional lives, Jocelyn, is that I was you know, this is how you know sometimes I'm a toddler. I was listening to that Shannon Sharp audio and I was like, clutch pearls, right? Because I go live every week and I cannot imagine a situation in which I accidentally go live. Like if I would go accidentally live like 2 minutes before this thing, I got on like my little workout clothes, honey. This thing is completely not acceptable for a live. And then I posted about it, and some of my friends were like, "Oh, we'll get you a camera." Look, I got a camera. I got a little camera up here. My little camera works. But this was completely audio, and I found myself blushing, honey. And Mr. Sharp, Tyreek is a wide receiver, but Mr. Sharp was a tight end in the NFL. He was pretty good. His brother was better than him, he said. But nonetheless, Mr. Sharp said that his colleague turned off the live. That's how I got turned off. I'm trying to figure out how I got turned on. But then this other lady I know said somebody accidentally went live So now I'm holding stress in my body about, like, let me be super careful about what's going on with my phone. Cause then Shannon up here trying to tell us that it was an accident. I said, oh, I don't want to know these things about people. And what famous people help us to uncover is with those of us who are in regular situations have to deal with every day. Mr. Sharp might lose a contract or two. I doubt it, but he might. I doubt it. But it is highly likely that he is going to make more money because of what has happened to him. So then you contrast that with the everyday citizen who might go live and what's going to happen. They're going to get fired and they ain't going to have nothing to do, right? What happens is if it's an everyday citizen who gets pulled over by the police, they start knocking on the window, you get handcuffed. You ain't got no friends in the NFL to stop along the road to help you. What happens when you don't have that kind of protection? When you think about, we're going to have a Chiefs game on Sunday. If they happen to lose, the domestic violence shelters in our area are going to be overrun with partners who have been beat up because of an overuse of alcohol and people who cannot manage their emotions and they blow their pain through other people. Regular old citizens, we ain't gonna hear about it. We ain't even, honestly, not very many people are talking about what happened to Rebecca. Somebody gets set on fire and dies, like world news for far more than a few days. And what happens instead is that when these de-escalations happen to everyday citizens, there's no recourse. There's nothing that can be done. You know, this week I had one of the a really good week. I had an opportunity to do the things that I like to do the best, giving keynotes and workshops, and it's a fun week. But I gotta tell you that when I consider that simply liking the post of Taylor Swift, who says that she is going to vote with empathy, because I don't care what anybody has to say about this. Voting for one particular candidate is a vote against empathy. It's a vote against empathy from an immigration standpoint. It's a vote against empathy from an economic standpoint. It's a vote against empathy from a women's health standpoint. It's a vote against empathy from a criminal justice standpoint. It's a vote against empathy in every single policy position you can ever even think of. Environmental justice, all of it. All of it. And so Taylor Swift says, hey, I'm going to put my people behind this thing. Now, she ain't got to do that. She could take more of a Patrick Mahomes approach where she just goes, look, y'all just get out to vote. I ain't going to tell y'all who to vote for. Y'all just get out to vote. But she's a childless cat lady. And she says, no, I'm going to vote with empathy. I'm going to let y'all know that I'm voting with empathy here. And Caitlin Clark likes that post. And then all of a sudden, she is the target of vitriol and hatred. And where do you think the vitriol and hatred is coming from? What do you think those people look like? I'm not going to tell you. You guess the demographics of the people who were amazing Caitlin Clark fans, and Angel Reese just need to pipe down a bit. And everything that she was experiencing was because of what she did, similar to Tyreek, right? Now, those same people are saying she's terrible. She needs to shut up and dribble. They're not going to follow her no more. What are the demographics of these folks? 100%. Guess the demographics of them. And I am not judging. I'm just describing. I am so grateful that Jocelyn has introduced me to this book. It's called Unoffendable. I'm about halfway through. And I also have the workbook that goes with it, but I like to read a book before I do the workbook because I feel like workbooks kind of tell you what you're supposed to be thinking, and I like to think whatever it is I want to think, and then I do the workbook. And there's a specific part in here that resonates with me. It's about empathy, and this is a Christian book, by the way, but the author highlights that Jesus understands people well and was never surprised when people showed up with gutter-like behavior. I wrote an entire book about how I have gutter behavior, and how Jesus is not surprised. And if we're going to be Christ-like, then we also have to not be surprised. And so, my loves, here's what I want to leave you with, two things. One, this trauma that you experience, and I'm going to use the word trauma. I know some people think that's a lot, gets held in your body. And if you don't do things to release it, it's going to pour onto other people. But secondly, if you don't remember anything else I say today, remember that this question that one of my first coaches asked me, and it was, are you surprised or are you disappointed? Are you surprised or are you disappointed? When I consider even what's happening with this ridiculousness that Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs, people start telling jokes about it. Humor is one of my top values. I love jokes. But then here come these really far left liberals going, oh my God, you can't tell a joke about this because listen, everybody is not nearly as heady as you. This academic nuance, I know, is where the answer is. But when you're trying to mobilize the masses, people don't care about nuance. So it's like, do you want to be right or you want to be happy? We are arguing to be right when what we really want to do is be happy and effective. And our collective wellness is tied together. So you think that you are somehow better off when police are treating people unfairly? You think that you are somehow better off when you believe that somebody as storied as Shannon Sharp didn't accidentally start a live so that he could generate more of this crazy making that causes us to be on social media all day, not paying attention to what's happening in our bodies? You think that you are better off because Caitlin Clark is somehow better than Angel Reese, and then when these people turn on Caitlin, you don't see the racial implications of what's going on with that. You think you're better off? You think you're better off because you happen to live in a space where when these things happen to you, if they happen to you, you can buy your way out of it. This one house, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and if one part of it's on fire, we all about to catch fire. We would do well. We would do well to try to figure out what we can do to release the pain that we have in our bodies, stop being so surprised, and recognize the depths of destruction to which human beings will go to be able to satiate their own needs, including me. And my son practices jujitsu. It's a method of fighting that is very strategic. And I keep holding this image of him in my head because street fighting is what I used to do. Just react. And then in that reaction, just throw everything I got at it until I'll come out on top. And sometimes I win, sometimes I lose. I got scars everywhere from the times when I lost. But I watch this boy. He studies his opponent. He is never angry. He is the most neutral he can possibly be. And he has practiced and prepared to whoop the hell out of them. And hatefulness needs that same energy, passion, and commitment. That's what we've got to do. But we can't do it if we are not paying attention to what is happening in our bodies. We have to be mindful and ready and willing and able. And while I would argue that I probably don't need to spend 1 ounce of my time advocating for a man with multi-millions of dollars who has a PR firm, who can help him spin the narrative to whatever they need to spin it to so that he can benefit from what happened to him last week before that game. I don't even know how he got in that game and then played and then out here jagging around with his hands, but I don't know how he did it. But what I will say is this: if he can be treated unfairly and unjustly, so can I. And so for the millions of people who get treated unfairly and unjustly all around the globe, we speak up because if not for the grace of God, there go I. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.